Do you find that women don't respect you, or maybe even your kids don't respect you? Maybe it's your work colleagues, friends, or relatives, and you're craving for respect, but they don't seem to respect you. In this podcast, we're going to explore why women, children, and even other men don't respect nice guys. Welcome to the Nice Guy Show. I'm your host, Faisal Kokar, and I'm joined by Ari and Chuck, and we are nice guy recovery experts. So I'm working with this guy, and he started to complain that in his previous relationship, he never got respect. And no matter what he did, he, gave them everything in the world. And no matter what he did, his woman just kept on asking for more and more and more. And it got to a point where even his kids had no respect for their father. And again, he was a loving man. He gave everything to them. And every time they wanted something, he'd always accommodate. He'd always be there for them. And he got exhausted with this. And what he found was that over time, he started building more resentment, more anger, more frustration because his needs wasn't being met. And he wanted to say, look, is it too much asking for, my needs to be met, for them to care about me, for them to consider me? And over time, things deteriorated, and eventually they got a divorce. And that really fired him up. And he said, "Look, I want to get back into get back into dating, but I don't want to repeat the same mistakes." So, guys, Chuck, have you ever found yourself being in a past relationship that you felt you never were respected?
Sure, absolutely. And probably rightly so. I didn't do anything to be respected for. Well, I was not respectable because I was a nice guy and I made covert contracts and I told half truths and I told people what they wanted to hear and just went ahead and did what I wanted to do and then would say, oh, I misunderstood what you were saying. I was passive aggressive. So all of these different behaviors that I was doing as a nice guy, unrespectable. So of course, people aren't going to respect that.
Ari, what about you? Did you give everything to your marriage and your kids, or your young boy, and then you felt like, why am I not getting respect?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely when I was married, I just felt like I would give and give and give more. And it never felt like enough. It even felt like the more I gave, the less respect that I got. I think, that's one of the nice guy traps is that if I just give more, then I'll finally get my needs met. And I'll finally get the respect that I want. The answer is not giving more.
But surely giving more would make sense. Like if I give them more of my time, give them, help, do everything I can just to make them happy, surely I'm going to get the respect I deserve. Why am I
No,
not getting
what
this?
you have to give more of other things. It's not just to please them. That's the nice guy trap. You have to give them more of your masculine leadership. You have to show them self-discipline. You have to give them boundaries. You have to give structure. You have to give challenge. Those are things that we all need. And when you're not giving those to your wife or your girlfriend, your kid, you're not going to get that respect back. So it was a hard lesson to learn.
So the things that, for example, boundaries, structure, these are the things that you didn't give in your previous relationship, in your marriage.
No. And these are things I've had to work on in my parenting. I'm thinking about yesterday, I was teaching my son to ride a bike and, I pushed him, and I tried to make it fun, like I was jogging alongside him as he practiced riding independently. And I counted the seconds. So I made it fun. I made it challenging. And then he toppled over and, skinned his knee a little bit. So he had a little bit of a scrape, and then he started having a meltdown. So that's where, in the past, I might have coddled him more and just, felt like I had to make it all better, make his feelings go away. You know, I really am doing something different now. I'm balancing his need for challenge with his need for comfort, for empathy, for play. This is part of the challenge of parenting, or I think being in a romantic relationship is giving different responses.
That's so true. That's so true. Um, I remember I was talking to my sister, and she said about she's good friends with my ex, and so she said, Faisal, uh, what you were missing in the marriage? And I said, like, no. And she said, look, there was this. She had one complaint about you, and when she told me that complaint, it was a real sinking feeling and really hurt. And what it was that I had no backbone, no leadership, and what that meant was that I was very indecisive in the relationship. Whatever you want, I will do, just to keep you happy. And I thought, well, that's a good thing. Whatever I'm going to put your needs first, whatever you guys want, my kids, my family, whatever it is. And I was trained that's a good thing. Well, what that did was it ended up being, it had the opposite effect over a long period. For the short period, that worked. They were happy, they got their needs met. But over a long period, what that did was it made them more irritated, resentful, and more frustrated at that. And it made them more spoiled. So the more spoiled they got, the more higher I had to jump more just to make them happy. And when I started to when I started working with this guy as well, it just came back a lot of memories that I had in my relationship as well. And like you were saying, Chuck, there was no discipline, there was no boundaries, there was no structure. And that's what builds respect, is when there's a standard, when there's a structure, and there's a routine. So this guy, when he was going through some of his problems, he was saying that, my kids don't respect me. And I saw that, like modern day kids, it's the same problem. You have kids in the UK, they're so disrespectful to their teachers, they're so disrespectful to their parents. And I found that my kids were, that was rubbing off on them. And my nice guy was, let's give them everything they can. But when I started to becoming more structured, disciplined, routined, what I noticed was that they started to become more respectful. And my son said to me the other day, and he said, and it really shocked me. He was going to bed and he said, Dad, when you cave in, he said, I don't respect you. That was shocking. He said, when you cave in, when you don't hold your ground, he said, I don't respect you. What do you think? What's he trying to say there, guy?
I think that we want respect, especially as men. I think one of our highest needs as men is the need for respect, to feel valued, to feel important, to feel like we matter. And when we don't get respect, we respond with anger. And when we respond with anger, we break down the very thing that makes us respectable, and that's trust. So respect comes from trustability, and trustability comes from structure. So if we're not building and maintaining a structure, we're not creating trust. And if we're not creating trust, then we're not going to get respect. And you can't have one without the other. You need the combination of, structure, creating trust that creates respect. Because when you have a structure, there's your boundaries. People know what the boundaries are, and then they know where the limits are, and then they can trust that. Whereas if there are no limits, that makes it really difficult. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I don't know what's okay and what's not okay. And so I'm constantly looking for the structure, the boundary. And that's why kids or people in general get in trouble, act out, is because they're just looking for the structure. They're looking for the boundary. Where is the edge?
So true. So true. And as my client was telling me, and I was saying, who's the king of your castle? Who runs your house? And he said, I think I do. I said, no, because you said, I think I do. That means it's not you. Yeah, because I said, as soon as you have that, it's a test I have for the guys. I'm like, who's the king of your castle? And I said, well, actually, it's not you. It's chaos. Chaos is running your relationships. Chaos is running your family. Chaos is running your life. And he said, well, you know what? I do put boundaries into place, and it works for a couple of days. And after a couple of days, everything goes back to disorder. And he said, when I try to enforce the boundaries, what happens is that, my wife, she used to give me dirty looks. They'd become passive aggressive. The kids would get, gang up on me. and they'll rally the whole family and say, look, you're the bad person for enforcing those boundaries. And he said, look, I just want an easy, problem-free life. So what I would do is, because I would get that heat, that tension, I just back off. And he said, I'm just in this never-ending circle.
Yeah.
That's what you get.
Because most nice guys don't have good boundaries, you know. Let me rephrase that. Nice guys don't have consequences to their boundaries.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
And they'll set a boundary. Don't move past this area, but they have no consequences. And a boundary without a consequence is just codependence. You have to have a consequence. In fact, I teach guys, start with the consequence. I'm going to hang up the phone if you keep talking to me this way. I'm going to take away your toys if you keep acting this way. And then the follow through is just following through with the consequence, which is the container, which creates structure, which creates trust, which creates respectableness.
That was one of the things I think guys were really shocked at, is some of the guys do understand boundaries, but most of them, what I found was there was no consequence. There was no consequence to those boundaries. I said, okay, so if that boundary is violated, then what? They're like, well, I'll have a word with them. I'm like, and then what? Well, hopefully they'll listen to me next time. And he says, I get irritated because they're not listening to me. I said, people don't listen to your words. They will listen to your consequences. When there's a wall and you know they can't get that past, that's what they will listen to.
This is where your own self-practices, I think, are so important. Like you have to respect yourself in order to get respect from other people. And part of that is setting some boundaries around your time, setting up your own routines and structure for yourself, and then adhering to those, and then noticing what happens when you don't adhere to those, what the consequences are. And that's something that you can then bring to your relationships, like your kids, because there are consequences when you don't even follow your own structure.
Absolutely. So boundaries without consequences, of course, that's not going to earn you any respect. And that was one of the things that, we were having this conversation about it. And he said, I never realized this. So, the biggest lesson for him was, the king wasn't ruling his castle. It was the chaos that was ruling his castle. Mm-hmm. And boundaries lets everybody know the standard, the rule of engagement where we work. And I love this quote. And I saw this on Integration Nation. And it was a really good quote. It says, remember, the only people who get upset when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited when there were none. So the only people who get upset when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited when there were none. So if you want to earn respect, set your boundaries and have consequences. And remember, you gotta be willing to walk away. So you gotta have that. Remember that main rule. That's out of my 12 laws. Law number 1 is be willing to walk away, because that means if you're attached, you want enforcers consequences. Guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, check out podcast number 28. She's mad at me again. Escaping the doghouse in relationships. Thank you for being part of the Nice Guy Show. Please, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. And also send a comment. What do you think? Were you disrespected in your relationships? How did it turn out? And when did you start to get respect back again? And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, please make sure you subscribe there again. And check out niceguyshow.com. And we've got a mailing list. You can join that, and we'll keep you up to date with other future episodes. Thanks again.
You've been listening to The Nice Guy Show with certified Nice Guy recovery coaches Ari Graf, Chuck Chapman, and Faisal Kokar. Be sure to subscribe to this channel so you can listen to our latest episodes, and visit us on www.theniceguyShow.com. If you have any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, send us an email at support@theniceguyShow.com. Thanks for listening.